Coming up, LSU gets a big win against Florida on Saturday, or was it a bad loss for the Gators? And Kirby Smart's got quite an interesting goal for his team. We'll tell you all about it coming up next, right here on AT&T's SEC Country Live. Hello, everyone. Welcome to AT&T's SEC Country Live. My name is Brandon Adams. This is the former Alabama All-American Mike Johnson. It is good to have you with us on the program today. We have a very busy hour coming up of SEC talk coming. We'll have Mark Burnett talk a little Alabama Crimson Tide with him coming up about 20 minutes. Also, 40 minutes after the hour, we'll say hello to Alex Hickey, who covers the LSU Tigers for SECCountry.com.
Yeah, I want to welcome all the LSU fans back to the show today, back to the comment section. Congratulations to you, Cliff Nelson. You're always with us every week. And a lot of interesting games, so it'd be fun to cover them right now.
Yeah, we'll dive into all of that here. We'll start with our first and 10 here. The big news taking place around the SEC. Item number one on the list here today is that LSU win against Florida on Saturday. And, you know, I think that there's two ways of looking at this. You mentioned, you know, Florida and LSU, two of the real big storylines, teams that are rich with storylines that we deal with each and every day here. And I guess as a way of setting that up, in your mind, is this a big win for LSU or is this a bad loss for Florida?
I think it's a big win for LSU, and that's a tough topic to kind of cover because I feel like you know, that could go either way. But we've kind of known what Florida is. These close games, they're going to continue to play these types of games, these one-score games. Jim McElwain's found a way the first couple of weeks to come out with a victory in some of these games. LSU, for everything fleeting in Baton Rouge, for everything that's gone wrong with them, and sometimes somehow they come up with a way to find a win. So I thought it was a little bit bigger of a deal for LSU to be able to go to Gainesville and find that victory. Obviously a statement game, a lot of emotions on the line. They were able to come up with the victory in a tough one.
Is this one of those things that you think makes you rethink what we were saying about Ed Orgeron last week, what everyone was saying about Orgeron? Obviously a mountain of negativity around the Tigers leading into this game, going out and getting the win, ruining Florida's homecoming. Does that change the way that you think about Ed Orgeron, change the way you think about LSU?
I don't think so. And I still have the same questions today that I had about Ed Orgeron last week. This was, to me, was not you know, one of those games where you have to be rebuilding. You're not rebuilding the program right now. You're coming at some of these games with a lot of talent. And Ed Orgeron found a way to use that talent this weekend. But where was it at last week against Troy? Why are we having so many issues on both sides of the line of scrimmage? You can deal with a Florida Gators team and play with emotion, but you can't do it against Troy. So I still have some of the same questions remaining this week that I had last week.
Yeah, and for me, the questions are on the Florida side here as well. This is a Florida team, obviously, that's had tremendous trouble offensively. And, you know, there have been flashes during the season when you thought maybe that's improving, maybe that's getting better. And yet in this game, I think some of those things reared their head once again after the game. Jim McElwain talked about everything that is on the mind of Florida fans right here. Massive disappointment, not just for the fan base, but for Florida players as well. Here's McElwain.
You know, that's life in the SEC. And for our guys, for this Gator team, it hurts. Guys are hurting in that locker room, and they should hurt. I mean, that's the nature of the beast. And yet, you know what? I think I'm pretty. First announcement I want to make is regarding.
So you hear from Jim McElwain there talking about the nature of the beast, the hurt that Florida exists there. And yeah. I think in some ways this Florida loss here almost feels like the foreshadowing of more trouble to come. I know going back to the offseason, neither you or I were very high on the Florida Gators, and I think you see some examples of that from this game about exactly why we had questions about Florida to begin with. This is a program. McElwain's supposed to be an offensive-minded head coach. Doug Nussmeier obviously supposed to be a highly regarded offensive coordinator, but there's frustration going here because this group cannot seem to figure it out offensively.
Yeah, it's interesting, and I think both of these you know, two teams took the field on Saturday. They kind of mirror each other in a lot of different ways. Kind of rebuilding defensively right now, not getting exactly what you thought you'd get out of the ground game and the offensive line, and two quarterbacks that really have struggled this entire season. And I thought that Felipe Franks, for everything that he's done well the last couple of weeks, just has not shown the ability to get this Florida offense over the hump, in my opinion. And I don't know, I thought this would be an interesting topic today to kind of bring up to you. I don't know the last time that the quarterback stats have mattered less in an SEC competition than they do this year. I mean, there's quarterbacks like Shea Patterson going out and throwing for 250 yards and losing big. And there's guys like Danny Etling, Jalen Hurts, Jake Fromm that are throwing for you know, a little over 100 and getting things done. It just, this Florida offense, for whatever reason, has not come into shape. And they thought they could lean on this offensive line and Martez Ivey and Juwan Juwan Taylor and McCoy there in the middle. Just not how things have started to play out down in Gainesville.
Gary Law in the comment section said if Florida could score at measly 20 points a game, this would be an undefeated team right now. And in some respects, that is true. This is a Florida team that just could not get that offense going against LSU. And I think there's reason to worry if you're a Florida fan. This is not some sort of one-game story. This is something that Florida's had issues with in the past and something we thought they'd have an issue with before the season. I think right now, obviously you're going to give LSU credit on this day for getting the win that they got. But I think moving forward, the bigger story here is what Florida may still have to deal with the rest of the season. I don't know that LSU capitalized on this win as much as Tigers fans want them to, but what Florida fans were frustrated by on Saturday, I do believe they will see again before this year is done.
I agree. And for everything you feel like Jim McElwain has had the answers to in his first couple of years, been able to squeak out some of these close wins, it bit him in the butt on Saturday. It really did. They were not able to find the answer, and Eddie Pinheiro, missing the extra point, and just couldn't come back from that. And Jim McElwain has found ways to win these games, and he just didn't this past weekend.
We'll have more on the Florida LSU game, including your comments throughout the day here on AT&T's SEC Country Live. That, by the way, is Mike Johnson. My name is Brandon Adams. It's great to have you with us on the show here today. Let's move on. Look at item number 2. A team in the SEC East that would appear to be rolling right now is Georgia after a 45-14 win over Vanderbilt on Saturday. Dogs' third straight SEC win by 28 or more points. And after the game, Kirby Smart talked about a very interesting strategy that Georgia approaches the start of the game with. You saw a lot of carries for Georgia running backs, including a 33-yard touchdown run for Nick Chubb to kind of get the scoring started for the Dogs. And Kirby Smart, after the game, explained there's a reason why Georgia starts those games that way right now. Here's Kirby.
I think that's the mentality of this team. It's really not a scoreboard deal. It's like we really just want to see if we can make the other team quit. And if you can try your best to make them quit and you start seeing the falling in of the defense line, the pushing, the movement, you know that you've got them where you want them. And that's kind of what our guys look to enjoy that moment. That's when you know you've won your box.
I'm extremely.
One of the things that I think is interesting about what Kirby Smart has to say right there is, for a Georgia program that, is just – it's in the midst right now of getting a lot of attention and a lot of praise because of the success that it's had, the blowout wins that it's had. Yeah. Well, when Kirby Smart says we got a goal to kind of go out there and make the other team quit, make the other team, shut down, that's sort of, I think, making that kind of stuff less likely to happen.
Yeah, listen, I love it. This is. We heard from both of these coaches we just talked about, Jim McElwain and Kirby Smart leading the season, and they both were talking about the improvement of their offensive line. And I think that's so, such a big topic to look at because Kirby was right. The offensive line has improved. They've been able to impose their will on a lot of these defenses they've been playing, and Florida has not. And that's what Kirby's talking about. You make these other teams want to quit because they know this is not a play where, hey, I'm going to get to freestyle on the defensive line. I'm going to get to rush the passer. The quarterback's going to be standing back there like a statue. You're not going to see 3rd and 14 at these defensive end positions. You're going to get hit in the mouth play after play, and that's the mentality Kirby Smart has brought, and it has worked. I mean, other than the Notre Dame game, there has not been a close game for Georgia, and I think that tells the tale of the mentality he's brought to Athens.
Santiago Diarn says, first time on here, go Dogs. I miss Coach Rick, but Kirby has my alma mater looking special. Santiago, thanks so much for checking in with us here on AT&T SEC Country Live today. And I think a lot of Georgia fans, Mike, are probably going to echo what Santiago says there in the comment section, that Georgia does look special right now. And one of the things that I think that we'll say about Georgia moving into the next few weeks, Missouri this Saturday, bye week after that, Florida the week after that, which is still obviously a crucial game for the Dogs, even after the loss by the Gators on Saturday. Can Kirby and Georgia keep capitalizing on this special level of play, this special start to the 2017 season? Because, right now there is a physicality that Georgia's kind of putting out there on both sides of the ball that probably can only be matched by Alabama in the SEC.
Yeah, it's going to be tough. And obviously, the Auburn game looms there at the end of the season for both of those football teams. But they are playing at a level that I'm not sure anybody can get to other than Auburn in the SEC. Because when you look at the way their schedule really amps up, you're going to get Missouri, you're going to get a Florida team who's down. South Carolina, for everything they've done well recently, still have a bunch of questions about their team. And so that I think when Kirby Smart, not that he's going to look at it, the schedule ahead with the football team, but if he did, I don't think there's any real dangers if this Georgia team plays Georgia football. He has molded them into a team that is not going to beat themselves for the most part, and I think that's a dangerous thing for the rest of the SEC East.
Rodney Grayhouse in the comment section says UGA's defense is stifling. They will smother you up and strike you until you want to quit. Go Dogs, best overall defense in the league. How about that last line for him there? Right now he's Rodney, and of course that's a biased opinion probably, but Rodney says the Georgia defense better than Alabama. Do you think what you're seeing from Georgia right now is as good as Alabama, potentially even eclipsing what the Tide has done thus far?
I think that they both match up well against different teams. I love the way Georgia's ability to rush the passer. I think their pass rushers right now are a little bit ahead of what Alabama's are. But Alabama's front seven, to me, still kind of holds the trophy there in that direction. And I like their secondary a little bit with Minkah Fitzpatrick back there. I do think it's a 1A and 1B thing. I don't think either one of these defenses looks head and shoulders above the other one. But to me, there are some tweaks going on. And Georgia's still a lot of tough competition to face in the future.
Let me actually ask you about this, because one of the things I've been saying about Georgia in comparison to Alabama, I obviously do Dog Nation Daily every single day. That's the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans. So I talk a lot of Georgia during the week. And one thing I've said about the Georgia defense that's different than Alabama is that Georgia probably relies on one or two individual players more so than Alabama does. I've said that if Georgia had to play a game without Roquan Smith, the inside linebacker, that's obviously a big loss for Georgia, the kind of individual name that you don't think of Alabama as having trouble playing without. But maybe for Alabama that's somewhat changing when you look at Minkah Fitzpatrick, who right now leads Alabama in tackles for loss, even though he's a defensive back. Is the Alabama defense changing now to the point where all of a sudden they are relying on an individual player like Fitzpatrick more so than they've ever relied on any single player in the past, and maybe a little bit more like the Georgia defense that is kind of built around some stars?
I definitely think it has changed. I think they've had to change with the personnel issues they've had. When you talk about the injuries they sustained against Florida State and all the players they lost off last year's team, one of the things that Nick Saban and Kirby Smart are both good at, if you're good enough to play, if you have 7 great DBs, he will find a way to get all 7 of those DBs on the field. And that's how they've kind of molded the changes they've made at Alabama so far this year. You see a guy like Deshaun Hen go down last week against Ole Miss, and Isaiah Buggs steps up. And I can't remember how many tackles Buggs had this weekend, but it was in the double digits. And so that's kind of what they're building, to where we can have reinforcements come in and have that depth, but still rely on some of those star players. To me, it's the same thing Kirby Smart's doing with Roquan.
We're not talking about Tennessee right now, but Brian Whidbey's comments too funny not to read. He said, I told you guys that Dormany and Garantano were going to be a two-headed monster, talking about the two Tennessee quarterbacks. He said they are scary bad, and then he gives you the 3 jack-o'-lantern emoji. So listen, you got to appreciate Brian, and the Tennessee fans able to kind of have some fun at their own expense at the moment.
Those quarterbacks back there getting some leadership reps, and it was a good week for Tennessee football. The best week Tennessee's had in quite some time.
Without a doubt. And by the way, it could be a good week for you as well. Let me tell you about a special offer right now. You can buy any Papa John's pizza at regular menu price and get the second pizza of equal or lesser value for free. That starts today through October 15th. We want to tell you about that special offer courtesy of Papa John's here today. And here on AT&T's SEC Country Live, let's move on here and look at item number 3 on our AT&T SEC Country Live First and 10 list. Georgia obviously rolling right now, playing well with another easy blowout SEC win. You can say the same thing about Auburn, who got another big blowout win against Ole Miss on Saturday. Auburn's also put together a streak of 3 consecutive very easy, convincing blowout wins. After the game, Gus Malzahn talked about what he liked about it.
I'm extremely proud of our team. This was a game that, a lot of teams could have came out and flopped around in the first half, especially with what happened last week with us and them. Real proud of our leadership that we answered the bell. We came out of the gate playing extremely well on really all 3 phases. Our defense was playing well in the first half. Our offense got in a rhythm. And played extremely well. I thought our special teams. The second half, it was just putting the game away, and we got a chance to play some young guys.
So you play young guys if you're Auburn. You also build confidence here. I gotta think this is an Auburn team that is pretty confident right now. They're able to lean on Kerryon Johnson, the running back here, and really give Cameron Petway that break that he needs to be back for some of the crucial games this team's going to play in the month of November. Right now, I believe that Auburn is every bit as good as I said they would be in the offseason. Do you agree?
I definitely agree. And like I said last week, you have to give credit to Gus Malzahn. Now, I do have a bone to pick with Gus Malzahn.
Okay.
I was feeling really good about this game and took Auburn at -22, and then they allow Ole Miss to jump back up and get them and cover the spread at 21. I was
a little
so
backdoor
mad about
cover
that.
there for you.
Door. But I love what he's doing right now. I think Gus Malzahn has moved this offense in the right direction. I think he's found a way to blend his own philosophy with Chip Lindsey's, and then also make the moves along the offensive line with Austin Golson sliding out to left tackle that really have opened things up. This was a different Auburn victory than we've seen this year. They come out and straight up run the ball down Ole Miss's throat for the entire first drive there. And I think that's what really makes the distinction between what Auburn has been in the early part of the season and what they are now.
Tim Tatum has an interesting point in the comment section. He says that, listen, I believe the Auburn defense is legitimate. I'm still not so on that offense, though. And I will definitely agree that the Auburn defense has outpaced the offense for most of the season. I think the offense is coming along here right now. And I mentioned before, the fact that it's not really been Cameron Petway who's been hurt. It's been Kerryon Johnson who's kind of led the way here. He leads the SEC in rushing touchdowns scored right now. That speaks to what Auburn's been able to do. And the other thing is, you kind of heard Gus Malzahn touch on this in the clip that we played. For an Auburn team that, had the easy blowout win last week against Mississippi State, they could have, sort of patted itself on the back and act like it had arrived. And for Ole Miss, who probably had something to prove after getting clobbered by Alabama, the truth is that's usually a recipe for the underdog to play better. The fact that Auburn kind of came out and demoralized Ole Miss again is actually a more difficult thing to do than the records and the previous scores might have indicated.
Yeah, no, I'm with you. And each week I feel like we've come in here and talked about this Auburn offense, and I say, you know what, when Cam Petway and Kerryon Johnson are both healthy, that's the best tandem I feel like maybe in the SEC, and they are a two-headed monster. But we haven't seen that yet this year. This is an Auburn rushing attack that really can be top-notch, and it really hasn't been at full strength. They've had offensive line shuffling going on. It feels like they've finally found the right starting five. And Jarrett Stidham, while not a ton of downfield plays until this past weekend, he has been as efficient as you're going to find in the SEC, and I love what they're doing right now offensively.
And let me say this. When you talk about that list of one-loss teams around the country, the best ones will include Ohio State, probably Oklahoma. You may include Notre Dame in that discussion. Any list of best one-loss teams in America, I think, has to include Auburn. Their only loss is to undefeated Clemson on the road in a one-score game. That's no apology necessary right there. Auburn is right there in the group of top one-loss teams in America right now.
They definitely are. And I pointed at Auburn before the year, and I said they'd lose 4 games. And they're still on schedule for the games that I thought they'd lose so far, but I have flipped my pick, obviously, for this weekend playing this LSU team. I think Auburn's just got too much firepower right now for what LSU is trying to do defensively. And we still have not seen Arden Key yet this year be Arden Key, and so I think that really tilts things in Auburn's favor.
All right, item number 4 on our AT&T SEC Country Live First and 10 list. Nick Saban having some fun at the media's expense on Saturday after the game against Alabama, or for Alabama, the win against Texas A&M. We'll actually talk to Mark Burnett about this in just a moment, but kind of going on about rat poison, saying that when the media says these good things about Alabama, when they praise Alabama, going into a game like Texas A&M, where the Crimson Tide was more than a 4-touchdown favorite on the road, and when the game's closer than it's supposed to be, maybe the media is to blame here for the thoughts they're putting into the head of the Alabama players here. You were actually one of those guys that got a lot of praise and got a lot of compliments and pats on the back from the media. Do you agree with what Saban's saying here? Do you think he has a point that positive statements from the media has the effect of poison on his players?
I think it can, and I think it's probably a little bit, obviously, in this particular circumstance, has gone that way. The media is going to be the media. They're going to talk good about what teams they think are good. You're going to see the top 25. You're going to see ESPN. You're going to see College Game Day, and they're going to talk about Alabama because they're a good football team. And so I think Nick Saban's message, and we've said it a million times in the show, he's talking to his players. Don't listen to what everybody's saying about you, because you know what? If you don't continue to do those things, they will flip on you in a hurry, and they'll be talking bad about you next week and how big of a letdown you were and how you didn't play very well. And so I think that's the message he's trying to deliver. Keep your foot on the pedal and keep doing the same things that you're doing. Don't listen to the outside noise. Be just as hungry as you were leading into the season.
Let me bring in Mark Burnett on this discussion, though. He covers the Alabama Crimson Tide for SECCountry.com. Mark, it's always good to have you here on AT&T's SEC Country Live. And let me first of all ask you, I guess in a half-kidding manner, what did you think about being called rat poison on Saturday?
I thought it was hilarious, man. I always laugh when he goes on these rants because, I've been in that room for a few years now, and I always know that these aren't directed at anybody in the room. He's trying to send a message to the fans or the players or parents of the players, friends of the players, different people, but it's not necessarily directed at the media. I don't know why anybody would take it personal. I just thought it was funny because, especially some of the fan reaction, because they're always like, if you don't write positive things about their team, they're upset. But if you do write positive things, now it's called rat poison. So I don't know. I guess we can't win in this situation.
Well, let me bring both of you in this discussion. Mark, I'll start with you because you're covering Saban now. But Mike, I want you to weigh in this because you played for Saban. When Saban has this kind of reaction to what's going on, is there an element of, is he having as much fun as he needs to be having with a team that's obviously really good? Now, I know he wants to keep the edge and keep his team focused, but is there a joyless manner in which Saban's kind of going through the motions on this that makes him hard for some people to be around, Mark?
No, I think it's a situation where he just has a message he wants to get out, and he sort of sees the local media as that venue to get that message out. So, I think he's enjoying it behind the scenes. I think it's a situation where he saw Alabama perform against Vanderbilt and Ole Miss and saw that, especially in the Ole Miss game, even though they blew them out, there's still some things to clean up. I think it's a lot harder when you're talking to 18 to 22-year-olds to say, hey, let's clean these things up after you beat a team 66-63. But when you're on the road and you try to squeak by 27-19, it's a lot easier to say, okay, I tried to tell you guys, if you don't listen to me, you're going to get beat down the road.
I mean, what do you think about that, Mike? You actually played on these teams.
Yeah, listen, Nick Saban, his philosophy, and he gets this from Bill Belichick, do your job. And the media has a job to do, but Coach Saban has a job to do as well. And he's going to try to get his message out any way he feels like he can. And he understands. Listen, Coach Saban, for everything that he doesn't do technology-wise, he knows what his players are doing. They're on Twitter. They're reading the news. They're seeing, their parents are sending them updates on what's going on. He knows exactly who he's talking to and how to get the message across.
Jerry Duffer in the comment section says, "What up, Mark? You need to tell these guys to read my comments. You always do, and I appreciate that. Much respect." Jerry, we'll read your comments too. I just read that one there. Mark Burnett's taking better care of you in his Facebook Lives than we are. Is that what it is, Mark? Are you giving better customer service in your Facebook Lives than we're doing?
Hey, man, I try to be there for the people, so whatever they want, I try to be there for them.
One more quick question from me, by the way. So Alabama does get up probably closer than expected, at least based on the Vegas perception against Texas A&M. What were your thoughts on Bama being challenged a little bit on Saturday?
Yeah, I thought the defense played lights out for the most part. I mean, they gave up that one touchdown that came out as a direct result of the fumble from the offense. And then that late touchdown was kind of in garbage time, so you don't really hold that against them too much. But yeah, I thought the defense played really well. The offense didn't look that great. They never really found a rhythm outside of maybe David Harris. The rest of the offense was kind of pedestrian for the most part. But yeah, I think this was a good test because it's one of those games where you can learn some lessons, but not necessarily have to lose the game. So I think this only is going to negatively affect Arkansas. Really, I mean, I think Arkansas is going to get the brunt of this Alabama wrath this coming week because Nick Saban's going to be on the players this week. The players are going to be looking to come out and make a statement and pray for Arkansas, you guys.
Well, Mark, one of the things that I noticed during the game was you talk about the offense taking a little bit of a downturn, and I thought really that kind of kicked into overdrive when Calvin Ridley was not on the field. What updates do you have about Calvin Ridley's injury?
Yeah, Calvin Ridley's injury was just a thigh bruise. He should be fine going forward. Nick Saban said that he was a guy who I think it was just a situation where probably some tightness, probably some soreness during the game. They didn't want to push him too hard. Had him over there riding the stationary bike. He did come back in a couple plays, but just didn't look like himself, and I don't think they wanted to push him. So they gave some extra reps to some of those young receivers. But a couple other guys, Tony Brown, Trayvon Diggs, should be back at practice this week. So from an injury standpoint, Alabama's looking pretty good.
Mark, it's always great to have you here on AT&T's SEC Country Live. We appreciate your time, and we'll look forward to having you in the program again very soon.
All right, thanks, guys.
Good stuff there from Mark Burnett. Covers the Alabama Crimson Tide for SECCountry.com. By the way, that's Mike Johnson, former Alabama All-American. My name is Brandon Adams. This is AT&T's SEC Country Live. AT&T, a proud sponsor of SEC Country Live. AT&T, entertainment your way. And in the comment section, Jeremy Pettis picking up on something that Mark was talking about there with Arkansas, saying, yeah, poor Hogs on Saturday. Speaking of the Hogs, let's make them the subject of item number 5 on our AT&T SEC Country Live First and 10 list. And it may be a bad blowout loss for Arkansas against Alabama, but it wasn't very good this past Saturday either in a loss to South Carolina. And maybe this game for the Hogs can be viewed as sort of the final turning point in the career of Brett Bielema in Arkansas, because it would appear that some allies from the past are starting to kind of change their mind on him, both former players that didn't play for Bielema, former players that did play for Bielema, and maybe even some of the current players, the fathers here. Let me see if I can run through some of these on social media. First of all, you got Drew Morgan, the former receiver from last year's team, who did not tweet himself, but we can show you a little bit of his Twitter history here. And by the way, folks, y'all are favoriting some of this stuff. Now, this stuff is public record, and it shows up on other people's timeline, and then they can go check what your action's been, and you see all these tweets from Drew Morgan that he's been favoriting. You know, Morgan played for Bielema, but he's favoriting a lot of complaints about Brett Bielema right there. That's probably a bad sign, right?
Yeah, no, it's warranted too. I understand that, once you play for a coach, you feel a certain need to kind of protect that guy and understand what his philosophies are and know him as a person. But let's not get this twisted backwards at any point. This was an ugly loss for Arkansas this weekend, and for a game against South Carolina that had so many questions, has not been able to find a way to rush the passer, has not been able to find an offensive playmaker, to get blown out by that many touchdowns and have 3 defensive touchdowns scored against you, it's going to be a black eye on Bielema. And you mentioned it. this could be the turning point where they lose a game like this they should have been a lot closer in, and all of a sudden everybody starts feeling like maybe this isn't the guy to lead our team.
And then you got a popular former player like Matt Jones, who was drafted as a wide receiver by the Jacksonville Jaguars, but was a quarterback when he was in Fayetteville, talking about Arkansas's offense, saying, nope, unacceptable, it's not working, 5 years below 500 winning percentage, nope. Then he tweets out, I love my Hogs, I will always bleed Razorback red. This is not it. I hate it for all the Hog fans. Coach B is not the answer. I think when a popular, you can see the retweets, the like numbers there, that's a popular ex-player saying that. Right. I think that's also one of those things that kind of pushes Bielema a little closer to being out the door, right?
Well, listen, how many times did you and I talk during the summer? The one way to really understand truly how fans are just getting the pulse of the fan base. If you really want to know how close a coach is to being fired or how many people are upset with how he's coaching, you can see it on Twitter. You can see it on Facebook. You can see kind of the outrage come to the surface from some of the fans, and you're getting that. And Matt Jones was a very good player for Arkansas. This is a guy who's probably a historical figure up in Fayetteville, and I think his opinion on these matters carries a lot of weight and becomes kind of a face for a lot of fans.
Yeah, Kevin Blackman in the comment section says that Bielema actually looks like the Hog mascot. It is funny. I know I'm not the first person to say this. As a matter of fact, I'm only saying this because I heard other people say it. But there's these moments where you see Bielema wearing with the face, and you got the Hog logo. It's amazing how much that Hog logo on his sweatshirt looks just like Bielema in the face. But to make matters worse, probably the worst tweet of all came from a guy named Randy Rogers, who's the dad of Zach Rogers, one of the Arkansas offensive linemen. We'll show you what he had to say here. He goes, I don't care how big, tall you are. If you can't block, you can't block. Then why the heck not try something different? # insane. That's the dad of a current Arkansas player essentially questioning some of the personnel decisions for Bielema there. That's as bad as it gets.
Yeah, I don't have kids, but I'm not a fan of when parents speak out like this and on behalf of their own son, because, listen, not only is this a bad look for this program and a lot of people asking questions, but this is a bad look for him. This is a bad look for his son in the locker room. This is somebody, hey, what's your dad think? What are you telling your dad about who's starting in front of you? If you're, how big or tall you are, you can't block. Well, guess what? If you can't block in practice, you can't block on game day. And so This is a bad look all around. And it just, like I said, this is an ability to get a pulse of what's going on in and out of this program, and a lot of people are not happy about this game.
Paige Monday in the comment section says, loved watching Matt Jones play for the Hogs. And that's another example of kind of what we're talking about here. When you have popular players weighing in on this subject, it makes it tougher for Bielema. And one of the things I think you and I will talk about this week is, because we probably haven't talked a lot about Arkansas because they're not very good, but when you start thinking about the potential of a coaching search and should they weigh the big buyout to do that, I think Arkansas has every right in the world to dream big here. I think Arkansas has every right in the world here to seek a big-name coach, and this idea that Arkansas ought to take a backseat to other SEC programs going through their own coaching search, I just don't think that's the case.
I don't think so either. I think when you look at specifically scenarios for some of these teams, Ed Orgeron's going to be locked in down at LSU, you feel like now, definitely after the victory over Florida. Ole Miss, a ton of sanctions on their side. And so when you start weighing Arkansas against some of these other teams in and around the SEC that might be searching for coaches as well, Arkansas right up there. I mean, this is a team that was successful under Bobby Petrino, and they have to find another coach that has that niche, the ability to get victories sometimes with lesser players. I don't see an end in sight to what the downslide that Bielema is going through right now. Questions about Austin Allen's health going into this weekend, obviously having to play the backup quarterback this past weekend, Cole Kelly. They're going to play a vaunted Alabama defense, and these questions are going to continue to come about.
I love these side-by-side comments in the comment section. Alan Allman says, the buyout for Bielema is too big. Brandon Folkert says, we've got the money. And that's really the discussion that's going on here because, I mean, the Bielema buyout's right there alongside the Orgeron buyout. It's like 11 point something million. Arkansas fans can tell me the exact amount there. But this is also a program that's got Jerry Jones as an alumnus, the Walmart family connected here. You got the Glass family that own the Kansas City Royals. You got some big-time donors and boosters connected to the University of Arkansas. There's no reason why you shouldn't be able to pass the offering plate around with some of those big names and bring that money in.
I agree with you. And listen, nothing will get that offering plate going. Nothing gets that can jingling like a 26-point loss to South Carolina. And as ugly as that was, and to me, that's the best way to kind of fundraise is to get those ugly losses out of the way. Then all of a sudden people start coming up off their pocketbook saying, I don't care what we have to pay. Let's get this guy out of the university and get somebody in there we can be proud of.
Jimmy Wade says Bob Stoops to Arkansas. That's a pretty interesting coaching rumor to think about. I don't know that Stoops would pick Arkansas, but I'm on record as saying I think Stoops coaches again, though.
Well, he's come out and said a couple times that he's not coaching. That would definitely.
I don't believe him. I have heard him say that.
I don't know that I do either.
I don't believe him when he says that.
Yeah, I don't know that I do either. I don't know that Arkansas is the optimal location for him to land if he is going to go back into coaching. But it is definitely an interesting name to look at in terms of a couple other SEC programs when you talk about guys that are going to come to the top of the heap.
Yeah, absolutely. That's Mike Johnson. I'm Brandon Adams. It's AT&T's SEC Country Live. AT&T, a proud sponsor of SEC Country Live. AT&T, entertainment your way. Less than 10 minutes from right now, we'll talk to Alex Hickey, who covers the LSU Tigers for SECCountry.com. We'll look forward to hearing from him. Speaking of that, before we get to LSU, how about item number 6 in our AT&T SEC Country Live First and 10 list? A little bit of mockery on the part of LSU for Jim McElwain, who you may remember last year said LSU got what it deserved when it lost the game to Florida there in Baton Rouge. Well, some LSU players had some fun at his expense in return for that. Let me show you first here a little tweet here from Darius Geis, the LSU running back, kind of reminding himself of McElwain's words. He says, "Did we get what we deserved this year, Coach?" That's Geis essentially tweeting right to McElwain, even using the at mention there for that. But he does give him a little bit of a hashtag great game. Then check this out from a couple of LSU players who also kind of pretended to be McElwain post-game, giving a little more mockery here. Take a look at this.
So, Coach Von Rosenberg, what do you think about the game today?
The way I see it, they got what they deserve. And it should have been worse!
So that's the LSU players there having some fun at McElwain's expense there. And, I think that speaks to how much tension there still exists in this rivalry at the moment.
I think it's going to continue. I don't think there's anything that's going to come to a close anytime soon. Just these last 2 games have been so heated between these 2 programs. And like I said, I think it's going to continue. When you look at the emotion that these LSU players are wearing on the sleeve, really the emotion is what led them to the victory in my mind. I mean, there was nothing beautiful that either one of these teams did. It just the LSU laid it all on the line, and it ended up getting a missed extra point that led them to the win. But I don't see it going anywhere. And like we talked about earlier last week, I was questioning whether or not this game was going to be as big as it was early in the year. It definitely paid off. You could see it. I mean, both teams on both sides really scratching and clawing and trying to do everything possible to get their team in the win column.
Yeah, without a doubt. And I agree with what you just said a moment ago. There's no way that the emotion wasn't a big part of this for LSU because, listen, I think you're looking at an LSU team in the first 5 games leading up to this one that has some real legitimate problems. I think that you're seeing that, and yet against Florida, you're able to put that aside because I do think that both sides on this feel like the other side has kind of wronged them here. And that's kind of the backbone for all great rivalries is you feel like you have a justifiable reason to hate the other side. I know Florida fans feel like they've got a justifiable reason to kind of hate LSU. Yeah. LSU kind of feels the same way there, and you see that the LSU players clearly still holding a grudge about last year's game, and the Florida side probably still kind of doing the same thing.
Yeah, in all great rivalries, there's always one side that the other side did it first. They did this back in the World War II era, or their head coach did this, or somebody did that, and that's what leads to those bad intentions when you head to the football field Saturday, and that's why you give so much effort in games like this, and that's what's going to make this game continue to be special. I'm so excited these 2 teams are matched up, and we're going to see this year in and year out.
Terrence Collins says that Florida was definitely overconfident. I think there's something to be said here, though, that Florida as a team may not always be as expressly confident as maybe some of the Florida fans in our comment section are. I think some of the Florida fans in our comment section leading up to this game, they were overconfident, but I don't know that you could say the same thing about the actual Florida team. I think the closer you get to Gainesville, the more privately, I think there are some legitimate concerns about what Florida has not been able to do this season.
Yeah, I'm with you. This is not one of those things where, every week it seemed like in years past we're turning around and we're hearing something else out of the Florida Rock Room about how they're good and about how they're going to beat somebody. That's not what we saw this week. And to me, I think it's interesting, and I'm going to ask Alex this when we get him on air. LSU fans, are you feeling better about Ed Orgeron at the helm right now, or are you still mad that why didn't we get the same intensity level last week when we played Troy that we did against Florida? Is Ed Orgeron going to be find a way in the future to get his team to play back to that level, or is it always going to have to be an emotional game to get LSU to scratch and claw for a victory?
Absolutely. Speaking of Florida, let's move on. Look at item number 7 on our AT&T SEC Country Live First and 10 list, and another example of something from Florida that I think has been a real problem this season. And that is players taking to Twitter to kind of express maybe not team-sanctioned ideas. Now, I'm all for free speech. I'm all for guys expressing themselves. But this may be an example of something that makes the Florida job a little harder for Jim McElwain and Doug Nussmeier. Look at this tweet from the backup quarterback from Florida, Malik Zaire. Now, you can tell me if I'm reading too much into this, but immediately or close after the game against LSU, Zaire tweets out, SMH, standing for shaking my head, what a shame, hashtag only Lord knows. Is that a tweet you want to see from your backup quarterback after a game in which the offense, not including Zaire, is not really doing all that well?
Yeah, no, it's not something I don't want to see. Not only for Jim McElwain, but if I'm another player in that locker room, if I'm one of the leaders on this team or on this defense or on this offense, I'm upset. And it has nothing really personally against Malik Zaire. I guess it does if you're reading that tweet. But how long have you been there? You haven't been through the rigors with us. You haven't seen Jim McElwain's first couple of years. You came to this program in July, and then all of a sudden you want to pout and complain after a terrible week 1 exposure against Michigan. You want to complain on Twitter and complain publicly about some things that you're going through. And I just don't think it's a good look in either direction. It's not a good look for the team. It's not a good look for the leadership. It's definitely not a good look from Malik Zaire.
Roger Steinberg, pretty critical of Zaire in the comments section. And I think this is a case that, go back to McElwain when he first talked about Malik Zaire. The truth is he was probably telling the truth back then that they just wanted to make their quarterback room as deep as it could be and the competition as deep as it could be. I mean, I don't think you can blame Zaire for not winning this job and blame Zaire for not being the choice of the Gators coaching staff right now. I mean, I guess he's done the best he can. He's just not living up to what maybe a lot of Florida fans hope that he would be. I will tell you, though, that no one has been more wrong about Zaire than I was, because I assumed that Zaire would win that job and actually allow the Gators to win more games with him on the field because he was the quarterback. As it turns out, I mean, he's just not an option because with Florida struggling with Felipe Franks, going back to Luke Del Rio, even giving Kadarius Toney a chance to do a lot of the things that Zaire would have done, Zaire is just not that option.
Yeah, and listen, I think Kadarius Toney actually has a big role in the story because I don't think if Kadarius Toney is not an option in the Wildcat, I think you do see more of Malik Zaire. I think you see them try to get these defenses off balance. But the way they're doing it now is Felipe Franks coming in, and then all of a sudden you're getting Kadarius Toney the ball in the Wildcat, and he's able to run it, and he has been extremely explosive in that role. So I think without the emergence of Kadarius Toney, if you had tried to redshirt a guy like Kadarius Toney, maybe if you had all those players that weren't suspended, maybe Kadarius Toney gets lost in the shuffle at the wide receiver position. But now that Kadarius Toney's out there and now that everybody knows he's a playmaker, he's going to continue to see the field and snaps that might have been kind of saved from Malik Zaire at some point in the future.
Daniel Ray says Malik Zaire is just getting ready for the NFL. It's all about me. Honestly, I don't think the NFL even knows who Malik Zaire is. I don't think the NFL's ever heard of Malik Zaire. If he thinks he's getting ready for the NFL, he is going to have a heartbreak coming at a certain point in time.
No, and it feels like we see this every now and then where, backup quarterbacks and they want to speak out. It's not a good look. If Malik Zaire, I know you want to be on the field, but guess what? This is only hurting your NFL aspirations if NFL teams think you're speaking out against your leadership and about your head coach. It's not a good look in any direction for you.
And by the way, how many times have we seen this with Florida where it was Mark Thompson complaining not too long ago. We had C.C. Jefferson, Martez Ivey. A lot of different guys have sort of spoken out here against the Florida coaching staff. And as we said at the time, McElwain has tolerated this kind of stuff. He let, Wilson and Tabor, the two defensive backs from last year's team, let them talk a lot of trash. There's a lot of free-spiritedness that's tolerated on social media. Well, when you allow that on one way, that door swings the other way as well. And right now that door is kind of hitting Jim McElwain in the face here because his players feel empowered to criticize his decisions on social media, and you cannot have a united locker room when that's what's going on.
Well, yeah, and we don't know what's going on behind the scenes. I would imagine that a lot of these, things that have happened within this program, Jim McElwain's probably calling these guys into his office and saying, look, let's talk about this man-to-man. If you think you're, Malik Zaire, if you think you're better than Felipe Franks, please turn on the practice film and show me where you've made plays or on the field against Michigan where you made plays that he has not made. And that's usually how those conversations go. Because I've seen them before. I've seen guys that are backups. I've seen guys that feel like they should be on the field. And then you hit the coach's office and say, who are you going to beat out? Who are you better than? Show me an example of why I should put you on the field. And for Malik Zaire, there is nothing to fall back on.
Tyler Mann in the comment section says at one point LSU was playing 4 freshmen in the offensive line at one time. How about that? Yeah. Jeremy Pettis talking about some Alabama. We'll do that in a minute. Denny McClain, though, shouting out Cliff Nelson, who you mentioned off the top of the show. He says, Cliff Nelson, y'all back in the picture. Don't you love it when all of a sudden you got other fan bases instead of calling out different people, they're like patting guys in the back? Because for some of these LSU fans, and we got a few of them who were just diehard regulars in the comment section, they took abuse upon abuse upon abuse every single Saturday this fall. I got to admit, I am personally a little happy for them to get a chance to get a break from that for a little while.
Yeah, I am too. That's why I wanted to mention off the top of the show that good for Cliff Nelson. I feel like, listen, and Cliff showed up even when the loss to Mississippi State. He shows up after the loss to Troy and is still a part of the comment section. I think that shows his fanhood, but I think that shows that a lot of these people can roll with the punches. And we saw the exact opposite though from Florida. Every week they'd scrape by and get one of these close wins, and it was still everybody's underrating Florida. Everybody's disrespecting Florida, and it finally comes to bite them in the butt. So a little bit of opposite teeter-totter going on in the comment section.
Pretty bold statement here from Logan Westrom in the comment section. He says, McElwain is the problem in the Swamp. It's entirely evident in the lack of respect that he's earned from his players. Do you think that Florida players have a low lack of respect for Jim McElwain, or is that even something worth pointing to and bringing up, that McElwain's having a hard time controlling that roster, that locker room?
Yeah, I think that looks apparent right now when you look at this program from the outside in. And I think it points back to leadership. I think that Jim McElwain has had a hard time developing leadership. And number one, first of all, you don't have a quarterback that you feel like can be a leader on this team. You have to be good a lot of times to be able to be a leader. They have not had that on the offensive side of the ball. Defensively, so many new faces. They lost a ton of talent off last year's team that might have been leaders. And all of a sudden, in that locker room, who is really leading this football team? I haven't seen it yet. I mean, maybe some of the Florida fans can point something out a little bit closer, but I haven't seen any leaders on this team, and sometimes that's what you get when you have a leaderless football team.
Chris Allison says, Florida's offense is boring, play calling predictable, playmakers were never given the ball in open space. Now, here's where you also do probably have to be a little fair to Florida, because you're really subtracting playmakers off this team in a rapid clip. I know that Kadarius Toney missed a little bit of time on Saturday with an ankle injury. Of course, he comes back in the game, but maybe still a little bit hobbled. Tyree Cleveland injured, not playing. Don't really know when he's coming back. Luke Del Rio gone. You've had the Jordan Scarlett, Antonio Callaway suspension here. So, when you say playmakers not getting involved, it's important to note that I just rattled off several playmakers that Florida thought it was going to have, and none of those are available to Jim McElwain and the Gators at the moment.
Yeah, it's been an uphill battle. I think that's the reason, at least personally for myself, I have not come down that hard on Jim McElwain. You look at what he has been able to do, keep this team's head above water, when he had 10 suspensions before they ever kicked off the season, right there before he kicked off the season. So I try not to come down that hard because I still think he's done a decent coaching job, but I have to admit the play calling was bad in the game this past weekend. Jim McElwain, you thought they'd really be able to lean on this offensive line, and it's just not what they've gotten. Kadarius Toney has looked good in spots. Malik Davis has been somebody that's jumped out to you as a playmaker on the offensive side of the ball, but not enough creativity for me on the offensive side of the ball. You see it throughout some of these other offenses in the SEC, and even Matt Canada showed it for LSU on Saturday. None of that really coming from the Florida offense, and I think that does make them very predictable.
Diedrich Frazier asked an interesting question. How many losses will Florida end up with? I think this Saturday against Texas A&M is no easier than this past one against LSU. I think A&M's a better team than LSU. I think that's a tough challenge for Florida. Then it's bye week in Georgia after that. And Georgia right now going to be a pretty prohibitive favorite against the Gators. I still think South Carolina presents a challenge for Florida. I think the tough games for Florida this season are by no means done.
No, absolutely not. And I do think that this is one season they're going to get their shot at Florida State. That's going to be an interesting matchup at the end of the year. Both those teams kind of reeling off losses this past weekend to rivalry teams. But when you do match up, I don't think there's any way they beat Georgia right now. When you look at this team, they have to look themselves in the mirror. And Texas A&M, I mean, Alabama really struggled in a lot of different ways. And Kellen Mond, it's like I mentioned about the quarterback stats at the top of the show, had good stats. I think he was 19 of 29 against Bama's defense for 250 yards passing. And that is going to be a tough task for Florida, a tough ask of that defense right now for Randy Shannon to go in and stop Texas A&M offensively.
All right, we'll move on here. We'll do item number 8 on our AT&T SEC Country Live First and 10 list. By the way, before I do that, let me remind you, that's Mike Johnson. I'm Brandon Adams. It's AT&T's SEC Country Live. Of course, AT&T, a proud sponsor of SEC Country Live. AT&T, entertainment your way. We'll try to catch up with Alex Hickey here in just a moment. As soon as he's ready in Baton Rouge, we'll talk a little more LSU. Before we do that, though, as promised, let's do item number 8 here and talk a little bit about the Tennessee Vols. Now, we're going to talk about the Butch Jones coaching status stuff later on in the week. I wanted to push that aside for Monday. Tennessee didn't play on Saturday, but there is some news coming out of the Tennessee program. In fact, let me let Butch Jones himself tell you what the news is. Apparently, the Vols going to be without a player here for the immediate future. Here's Coach Jones.
This announcement I want to make is regarding Darrell Taylor. Darrell Taylor has been suspended indefinitely. There's been no timetable set on his return. He'll have certain stipulations and requirements that must be met. There are multiple factors that have led to this decision, and that will be my only statement at this point in time regarding Darrell.
So you may be wondering, why is Darrell Taylor suspended from Tennessee? What's going on here with this? What could he possibly do to get suspended? Well, Jimmy Hyams on Friday tweeted this out. We'll show you this tweet as a way of maybe suggesting, or not even maybe, this is the why he's suspended. According to a source, Hyams says that Darrell Taylor kicked Trey Smith, that's a former 5-star offensive lineman, in the face during practice during a drill. Smith needed stitches, so Taylor's been suspended here. Supposedly, I guess Taylor's now apologized to Smith. A few things from me, if you don't mind.
You have the floor.
First of all, I sort of want my 5-star offensive tackle to win this fight.
Yeah.
I mean, is that? I don't mean to be politically incorrect, but there's a part of me that says, I sort of need my guy, Trey Smith, to be the one doing the kicking and the one creating the need for stitches, not the one getting stitches. Am I wrong for saying that?
Yeah, you're absolutely wrong for saying that. And it's because we don't know if he lost a fight. Maybe he's scrumming one of his buddies.
He's the guy getting stitches.
No, maybe he's dogging somebody else out on the ground and somebody walks up and kicks him in the face. I don't think that in a fight, unless they were in a kickboxing ring, I don't know how he gets kicked in the face if he's actually fighting the guy one-on-one. Unless he got roundhouse in the face.
Okay.
And listen, this is the road you've already pointed out. The offensive line.
Oh, that's right. Mike
Johnson, you don't want to go through this.
The offensive lineman.
Plenty of times I've been in those situations where it's a scrum and all of a sudden somebody goes above and beyond it. And so I'm not ready to say they were squaring off and he just got roundhouse in the face and needed stitches. We don't know if he lost the fight.
Here's the second thing. How many fights can you get into in one season? Between Trey Smith and Darrell Taylor, Nigel Warrior and... who was the guy that supposedly fell on the helmet? Shy Tuttle.
Yeah.
It's like, how many fights can you get into in 1 year? Now, listen, I totally believe that football is an aggressive sport. I think that emotions are going to spill beyond the whistle. I don't mind a little pushing and shoving. But when two different guys have to get stitches or be tended to, I don't know if Tuttle got stitches, but something happened because, clearly it became a public story. If that happens with two different guys in the course of the same season, one in which you're not fighting anybody on the field, that is not a good look for Tennessee.
I don't know. I like it. I actually kind of like it.
Do you really?
I love it. I think it sheds a lot better light on what we're seeing out of Butch Jones and his staff because they have this reputation for being a soft team where these guys don't really want to play hard. If they're doing that in practice, and they have a ton of energy and a lot of emotion on the line in some of these practices they're going through. I'm telling you right now, I'm not going to say every day that we fought while I was in college, but at least once a week there was a Donnybrook.
Hold on. You are so wrong about this. You are so wrong.
Can't wait.
I don't care about Donnybrook between a team that's winning. I don't care about that. That's just good emotion. But what you just talked about was Trey Smith getting kicked, and you made it sound like Smith was on the ground when he got kicked. That's not good emotion. That's a cheap shot right there. That's a dirty move. When you're standing, the guy's on the ground, and if you're telling me that that's what happened, or if that's the suggestion that's what happened, that's not emotion getting the best of you and two guys just want it real bad. That's one guy saying, I've got a guy in a vulnerable position. I'm going to take advantage of it. That's what a bad guy wrestler does. That's not what a teammate does to one of his guys.
I do agree with you on that point, but what it tells me is that Trey Smith is practicing probably extremely hard. And, maybe he went hard in the wrong direction and somebody didn't like it and somebody wanted to answer this true freshman that obviously was maybe on the ground or doing something that somebody didn't like on the team. And I think it's a better look for me. I would rather you look like a team that fights too much than a team that is scared to take the field and scared to get hit on Saturdays. If that's the emotion you're going to show me and that's what you're going to tell me is the story coming out of Knoxville, then I think it's way better than some of the stories we've heard in the past where, hey, these guys don't really want to go to battle.
Roderick Henderson says, please don't fire Butch. Give him a raise and extension. Justin Eric Cunningham says, hey, at least they're champions of life. I think my problem is that we're just talking about two different kinds of fights. You're talking about the kind of fight that happens when two guys go a little beyond the whistle.
Right.
What I'm talking about here is fights where somebody's getting hurt, fights where someone's getting injured, fights where someone is getting the best of someone. And that's the kind of thing that makes me believe that these Tennessee players have zero respect for Butch Jones.
Well,
if you kick a player in the face, then you are not worried about retribution from your coach whatsoever. This, to me, feels like an example that Butch has totally lost the locker room.
No, I disagree. I feel like, obviously there's been a ton of questions about Butch Jones, and there's a ton of questions about the tenacity that his teams play with. I don't know the story enough to say that this is a bad look on Butch Jones. I just don't. I don't know. Obviously we've seen an apology. We don't know what Trey Smith was doing. Maybe this guy felt in the right and felt like he had nowhere else to go other than kick his way out of it. So I'm just not ready to bury Butch Jones over this one. We've done it so many times with so many other storylines that I'm not sure this is a bad look for them. I love the fact that there is that much emotion going on the football field at practice right now.
All right, let's go to item number 9 here on our AT&T SEC Country Live First and 10 list. Big news for Georgia on Friday. Before it played, Vanderbilt got an easy win against the Commodores. Georgia also got its own win in recruiting as 5-star quarterback Justin Fields, the nation's #1 player, chose the Dogs here over Auburn and Florida at one point, Florida State, LSU, Alabama. You see there live footage of Fields during his ceremony to school, pulling off his jersey, showing the Georgia jersey. And for a lot of people maybe outside the sort of Dog Nation bubble here, they may wonder why Fields would join up in a program that's already got 2 former 5-star five-star quarterbacks with Jake Fromm, the current starter, Jacob Eason, last year's starter, who's still trying to work his way back from injury. Well, when Fields met with the media on Friday, he was asked about the relationship he has with the two quarterbacks that Georgia already has. Here's what Fields had to say.
I think I have a pretty good relationship with the two. I mean, they're both great quarterbacks. Coach Smart, I mean, he hasn't promised me any playing time. The only thing he's promised me is he's going to play the best player, and that's really the only promise I want. So, I mean, my plan is just to go in there, work hard, study the playbook, and just really create those relationships with the players and just do my best.
Gary Lawn has an interesting comment in the comment section. He says, even if Fields sits the bench for 4 years, it's a win for UGA. They won't have to face him on another team. But how about the idea of sitting the bench, to use Gary's phrase, on a roster that's already deep at quarterbacks and has an entrenched starter? Do you think Fields made a bad decision by going to Georgia?
I don't think it was a bad decision. I love guys that want to show up and compete places. I think it's interesting. I would love to be sitting in a meeting room with Kirby Smart when he's meeting with Justin Fields and just wondering what that recruiting pitch is, whether if they're promising him some early playing time or they're going to change the dynamics of their offense with him moving forward. But Jake Fromm, to me, right now, I mean, you can tell me if I'm wrong, I feel like he's entrenched as a starter. And if you think Justin Fields is going to go to Georgia and sit down for 4 years while somebody else plays, then you've got it all wrong in the comment section, because that will not happen. That will last for a year and a half, and he will be out of there. I think it begs us asking a ton of questions about not just Jake Fromm or Justin Fields, but about Jacob Eason as well, and what are we really getting out of that quarterback room for Georgia?
Yeah, Michael Comm in the comment section says Fields ain't sitting. Michael's obviously a big Georgia fan, and I think Michael's right about this. Fields is not coming to Georgia to sit on the bench, even with Fromm playing as well as he has. And Fromm's had some good moments, some bad moments, but for the most part, it's been a pretty good freshman year for Jake Fromm. And yet when it comes to Justin Fields, I think the expectation on his part, I think this is probably justifiable that he's going to come in and get a chance to play at least some in every game next season, because he has the one thing that Georgia currently doesn't have. Georgia's got, at least based on recruiting rankings, two very good quarterbacks right now, but what it doesn't have is any kind of dual threat quarterback. It doesn't have the kind of quarterback that possesses the athleticism that you're seeing from Fields right there. And it's because of those abilities to use his legs that Fields thinks he's going to be on the field for Georgia next season, and I don't think he's wrong.
No, I don't think so either. I think when you look at probably what Kirby Smart is trying to do, I think that we've brought up this name one too many times probably on the show, but Lane Kiffin and that offense that he was running with Kirby Smart's last 3 years at defensive coordinator probably opened Kirby's eyes to a lot of the things that you're seeing that Kirby's trying to do there at Georgia. I think that he sees a Jalen Hurts dual threat style of offense that can be implemented at Georgia and raise their kind of offensive abilities. And so I don't know how that really pans out. I think obviously he's got to get there, and you know me, I have a ton of questions about recruits a lot of times, even if they are 5-star. He's got to get there and pan out. But I want to know what the product will look like on the field next year and where that will leave Jacob Eason or Jake Fromm if he is the starter.
And here's the thing you understand about Justin Fields for Georgia. The real win for Georgia when it comes to Fields is obviously partially Fields. He's the nation's #1 overall player. But the thought here is, and the recruiting experts will tell you this, including Jeff Sintel, who joins us from time to time here on AT&T SEC Country Live, is Fields is thought to be bringing 8 players with him to Georgia. I'm talking about guys who are also of that 4- and 5-star variety. Some who are already connected to Georgia, other guys who are currently committed to other places. That's the real win for Georgia when it comes to Fields. For a program that was #3 overall in the recruiting rankings last year, according to the 24/7 Sports Composite, Georgia's probably going to be back in that spot again this year as well.
Yeah, and that's what I would be most excited about if I'm a Georgia fan looking at this commitment. It's not just that Justin Fields might be showing up and maybe they're going to change the offense and we'll see what Jim Chaney can do with him, but it's all the recruits they're going to be able to bring along with him. And we've had a couple of guys already say that, hey, I'm going to go where he goes. I want to be a part of that program. He is a special player. We've seen it on film a couple of times this fall. That guy does some incredible things, but I would be more interested, if I'm a Georgia fan, in what he's bringing with him and the talent they're going to have in this class next year.
And I think the other thing here, final point for me on this is, Kirby Smart was Alabama defensive coordinator at a time when Alabama had great talent, but had some trouble with a dual threat quarterback like Deshaun Watson. Even last year with Smart at Georgia, Watson, again, the national championship game, gave Alabama some grief. I think Kirby Smart saw from that. I think that he was molded by that. I think Kirby kind of salivates about the idea of giving himself his own dual threat quarterback to do some of the magical things that Deshaun Watson was able to do.
I agree. That's what I was just saying about Lane Kiffin. I feel like coaching opposite of Lane Kiffin at Alabama for a few years really opened his eyes to what really an offense can be. You can still be a ball control offense. You can still run the football, but you can do it with a dual threat quarterback. I think that opens up so many possibilities. I think Kirby loves that idea.
All right, item number 10 on our AT&T SEC Country Live First and 10 list. Did you see this pop up over the weekend? Auburn's getting, just wasting Ole Miss, and around that time, Ole Miss decided, you know what? maybe we should kind of go out there and take care of our due diligence. Go ahead and post our coaching job online. You ever dreamed about being the Ole Miss coach? Well, here's your chance to do that. There's the actual job posting right there. You can go to their official website and you can sign up, put your resume in there, and you can be potentially considered as the next coach of the Rebels. And I got to tell you that, over the last few days, a lot of people have been kind of weighing in. Even when you weren't here the other day, somebody was like, hey, maybe Mike Johnson should be a coach. Maybe he should be a coach at this place. Well, you know what we did on your behalf? We decided to work as your agent.
No.
So we have actually we've put in your resume. So maybe you'll be hearing from Ole Miss here at a certain point in time. We've put in an application for you to be the next Ole Miss coach.
Somebody like Andy Staples or somebody is going to do a Freedom of Information Act, and they're going to pop up and be like, oh, my God.
It's going to say Mike Johnson, SEC Country Live.
I had no idea y'all did that.
Basically, your resume has 3 lines. Played at Alabama, played for the Falcons, works at SEC Country Live.
That's me, buddy. That's me.
That may be enough to get you the job.
I hope so. I'd love it.
Michael Hall, by the way, in the comment section says miles to Ole Miss. It is going to be some. I don't know if it's less miles. It's definitely not Luke. I mean, Luke is so overmatched right now. It's not even funny.
Yeah, I think somebody made the comment last week in the comment section. He might as well be air right now because they're not even batting an eyelash in that guy's direction as far as keeping that head coaching job. And it's sad. I know that's a guy that loves Ole Miss, has been around the program, but they need somebody who can take that from the next level, and Matt Luke is just so far in over his head, like you said.
So we will keep you up to date on exactly what happens there. If we hear back from Ole Miss on Mike's behalf, we'll see if we can get Mike an interview. Now, the thing we're not looking to do is have you move on from AT&T's SEC Country Live. You know what? Maybe you could do both jobs.
That would be so fun to go do an interview and then come back here and be like, Ross Bjork told me this.
Right, exactly. Do you think that if you were the Ole Miss head coach, you could get the hour 2 p.m. Central free every day in order to do this show?
I tell you what, I would bring y'all in and give y'all free access to the entire program.
Well, that's nice to know. Yeah. That is, at least for now, our co-host here on AT&T's SEC Country Live, Mike Johnson. My name is Brandon Adams. It's great to have you with us. Of course, great to have AT&T with us as well. They are a proud sponsor of SEC Country Live. AT&T, entertainment your way. And it's never too early to start looking ahead at next week's games, courtesy of AT&T. Yeah. We'll do that right now, their AT&T look ahead. Seeing how this thing takes shape next Saturday, see if Mississippi State can get back on track after a couple bad losses over the last couple of weeks. Tennessee also coming off its bye week, looking to see if it can right the ship against a South Carolina team that got a nice win against Arkansas on Saturday. Auburn tries to get the first win against LSU on the road since 1999. They are a point spread favorite right now for the first time since at least 1995. I saw Ross Dellinger put out there on Twitter. Vandy, Ole Miss, Texas A&M, Florida. We've already said that's a tricky game for Florida coming off the LSU loss. Arkansas, Alabama may be trouble for the Hogs, and then Georgia, big favorite at home against Missouri. Its last tune-up game before Florida in 2 weeks. So kind of an interesting slate in the SEC next week.
Definitely an interesting slate. Some games I'm going to be paying close attention to. You mentioned it, Auburn a favorite over LSU, but not as wide of a margin as I think that a lot of people expected. I saw it at 6 points today, which is not anything like I would expect of that. And Alabama and Arkansas and Georgia, Missouri, I think those are 30-point spreads. I mean, that just continues to get lopsided in a lot of these games.
Absolutely. Now, I do think back to 2014 here for a moment when coming off the loss to Ole Miss, Alabama played Arkansas and did not play all that much better. Only won 14-13, something like that. We were earlier in the show talking about, hey, it may be, hogs to the slaughter here, pun intended, against Alabama on Saturday. But is there a chance this is just that Alabama lull that sort of takes place sometimes last week in September, first couple weeks in October?
I think it's always a possibility, and I've said it since the summer that I think at some point Bama will have a letdown mid-season. And I don't know that Arkansas has the ability to be able to do that. Austin Allen, for everything I loved about him during the summer, has not played well. They have not played well up front. The running game hasn't gotten going, and completely overmatched against South Carolina last week offensively. And so there is teams that I feel like can give Bama a scare, Texas A&M being one of them, but Arkansas should be overmatched, and we'll see how Nick Saban goes to work.
All right, before we do our Champion of Life today, let me remind you one more time about a very special offer from our friends at Papa John's. You can buy any Papa John's pizza at regular menu price, and you can get a second pizza of equal or lesser value for free. That starts today through October 15th. Just make sure you check out your neighborhood Papa John's for that. You can find out online at papajohns.com, but a great offer right now from our friends at Papa John's. All right, Champion of a Lifetime. Before we get to it, let me just say this. This may be the most not safe for work Champion of Life that we've done on this show. You just got to be really, really careful about this. If you're at work, you got to do this deal for like 60 seconds. You got to bring that laptop down just like that.
We are at work, man.
You and I are at work, but so this is online everywhere. You've probably seen it, but some Florida fans took umbrage with the LSU band playing during its supposed Tom Petty tribute on Saturday. Petty was obviously, the Heartbreakers were from Gainesville, Florida, so Florida honored Petty during halftime after Petty's passing, and the LSU band played its normal song like it normally does during that time, and some Florida fans, including one apparent big Tom Petty fan, were not happy about it. Take a look at some of the video that was captured here. First of all, I can't quite make out what this lady is saying. I can't quite read her lips. But here's the Tom Petty guy here. This guy is completely unhappy. He's got his overalls on, his Tom Petty shirt on. You see the LSU band member kind of talking trash there. This guy in the orange shirt with the sunglasses not on his face or not on his eyes. Helps this guy think better of it. I have no idea what he kind of said to him. You've got a Florida fan at the end who kind of shows some biceps there. Maybe that was an LSU fan. There's quite a lot to digest in that video there.
A lot to digest, and I didn't like it. I didn't like the move. There was some definite F words and A words coming out of that guy's mouth right there. Tom Petty, a living legend, or has passed this past week, and so I love the tribute to him, but. Man, there's some passionate people out there, especially down in Gainesville.
I mean, I didn't realize that you had to be totally, completely silent for the song to play.
Yeah, I didn't either. I don't know how loud it was. I wasn't in the stadium.
I mean, it's a marching
Just hearing
band.
it, but I'm kind of reading it on Twitter, and I'm thinking, what is going on there?
But it's a marching band. Marching bands bring the horns to use them.
Yeah, I guess so.
They bring the drums to use them. I mean, they're not going to sit there silent.
Yeah.
Nonetheless, thanks for being here with us on AT&T's SEC Country Live today. We'd love to have you subscribe to our podcast on iTunes. You can also give us a rating and a review. And, of course, please share the show with your friends on Facebook. Let them know we're talking SEC each and every day here on AT&T's SEC Country Live. We're back tomorrow. Busy show for us tomorrow as well. A lot of aftermath still left over from some of these games this weekend. And we just saw a moment ago, a huge slate on tap for this Saturday as well. We'll see you then. Thanks for being with us here on AT&T SEC Country Live.